My God, it's me. The words escaped Jasmine's lips in a whisper, barely audible over the soft hum of distant jazz and clinking crystal. Her fingers trembled, nearly dropping the ornate tray she was carrying as she stood frozen in the private hallway of the Blackwell mansion. Her wide, stunned eyes were fixed on a golden frame mounted on the wall, one that held a photograph so familiar it pulled the breath from her lungs. There, framed like a sacred artifact, was a photo of her at around age 4. The same shy smile, the same wild curls, the little pink dress she vaguely remembered from the few memories she had of early childhood. But how in God's name had her childhood photo ended up hanging in the private wing of one of the wealthiest families in Chicago? Jasmine Mitchell, 24, had worked dozens of high society galas as a waitress, always blending into the background with professional grace. She had passed champagne to billionaires, smiled politely at celebrities, and vanished like smoke at the end of the night. But nothing, none of those glittering evenings, had ever prepared her for this. She had always known her history was fragmented. Raised in foster care since infancy, she had grown up with vague stories about a house fire and lost documents. Social workers told her little. Difficult circumstances, they'd say. Untraceable records. But this was beyond anything her nightmares had conjured. That photograph didn't just represent a past she had forgotten. It was a doorway to a truth she had never been allowed to know. Half an hour earlier, Richard Blackwell had walked past her like she didn't exist, a man of towering stature and meticulous polish. Now she stood in a wing where employees weren't permitted, staring at a relic of her own stolen life. "Hey you, what are you doing here?" The sudden bark of a security guard's voice jolted her back into the present. Her heart pounding, Jasmine turned to face him. "Sorry," she said, forcing a sheepish smile. "I got lost looking for the bathroom." The lie came easily, though her hand still shook. As the guard escorted her out of the restricted area, she committed every detail of the photo to memory. The frame, the background, the placement. She wouldn't forget. Back in the main hall, under the golden chandeliers and the soft murmur of elite conversation, Jasmine's eyes instinctively sought Richard Blackwell. He stood at the center of it all, impeccable in a midnight black tuxedo, a drink in hand, surrounded by admirers as he spoke about his charitable foundation for underprivileged children. Applause followed every word. Jasmine's stomach turned. What cruel irony. The man being celebrated for his compassion toward abandoned children had a photograph of his own abandoned daughter hanging like a secret trophy on his wall. She watched him closely, studying his every calculated gesture, every carefully rehearsed word. And then, there it was, a crack in the facade. When he spoke of second chances and broken families, something flickered in his eyes, a shadow, a guilt that was subtle but unmistakable. "Life sometimes forces us to make impossible decisions," Richard said, his voice heavy with carefully measured sorrow. "Losing a daughter changes a man forever. Losing or discarding." Jasmine's blood turned to ice. She hadn't died. She had been erased, forgotten, left behind. And now the man who had walked away from her was being celebrated for his resilience, for turning his grief into purpose. That moment shifted everything. Jasmine made a quiet, firm decision, one that would change both their lives. She was going to uncover the full truth. And when she did, Richard Blackwell would pay dearly for every lie. Every night she'd spent crying, wondering why she wasn't enough. While the crowd clapped for the philanthropist of the year, no one noticed the faint smile curling on Jasmine's lips. It wasn't the smile of a daughter discovering her father. It was the smile of someone who had just discovered her enemy's greatest vulnerability. 3 days passed, but the image of that photo haunted her like a ghost. Every time Jasmine closed her eyes, she saw it. Her younger self, innocent and smiling, preserved in a mansion built on deception. She couldn't stop thinking about the man who had the power to protect her, but chose instead to build a legacy on her supposed absence. She needed answers. But where could she begin? Richard Blackwell was practically untouchable. CEO of a multinational empire, board member at prestigious universities, patron of orphanages, children's hospitals, and reform programs. To the world, he was a saint in Armani, but Jasmine had seen the shadow beneath the shine. She knew it was a mask. That's when she remembered Marcus, the veteran bartender who worked most elite events in the city. If anyone knew the skeletons in society's golden closets, it was him. Blackwell? Marcus choked on his coffee when Jasmine brought up the name during a quiet moment in the staff lounge. Girl, you don't want to mess with that man. He's got tentacles everywhere. Why do you say that? Jasmine asked, keeping her tone casual while she wiped down glasses. Marcus leaned in, voice lowered. There have always been whispers about a daughter who vanished. His wife died in a suspicious accident when the girl was 4. After that, poof, no trace of the kid ever again. Jasmine felt her pulse throb in her neck. 4 years old, just like in the photo. The weird thing, Marcus added, glancing around to make sure no one was listening. Right after the wife died, Blackwell got this insane payout from her life insurance, and the girl, she just disappeared. No police report, no funeral. It was like she evaporated. He scoffed. And now he's all about helping orphan kids? Please, nothing cleans guilt better than a foundation with your name stamped in gold. That night, Jasmine created fake social media accounts and began digging. What she found made her head spin. Richard had remarried 3 times after Helena Blackwell's death. Always to younger women. Always with strict prenups. None of the marriages lasted more than 2 years. More chilling still, Jasmine found archived articles about Helena, her biological mother, a children's rights activist, a woman fighting to reform the adoption system. The final article before her death stated she had uncovered serious irregularities at private adoption agencies. 2 weeks later, she died in an accident. How convenient. Jasmine began printing every article, every record she could find. She created a timeline. Helena Blackwell was investigating corrupt adoptions. Then she died. Richard inherited her fortune. The daughter, Jasmine, disappeared. She needed help. Someone who could go deeper. At dawn, she approached Margaret Santos, a retired private investigator who came to the cafe every morning for her extra-strong cappuccino. Jasmine poured the drink and slid it across the counter. Margaret, I need a favor. The older woman raised an eyebrow. Doesn't sound like a small one. I need information on someone powerful. Margaret studied her face, eyes narrowing with practiced intuition. At 65, she could spot desperation like a bloodhound. How much can you pay? I can't, but I'll work for you. Cleaning, filing, whatever you need. Margaret gave a slow, intrigued smile. It's been a while since I've had a real case. Sit down. Tell me everything. As Jasmine poured out her story, Margaret took notes in a weathered leather notebook. When she finished, the investigator closed it and looked Jasmine in the eye. Sweetheart, you're not just looking for your father. You're hunting a predator, one who may have killed your mother. Over the following days, Margaret began to dig. What she unearthed was worse than Jasmine had imagined. Richard hadn't simply abandoned his daughter. He had forged documents declaring her dead in the same accident that supposedly claimed Helena. Margaret laid the proof before her. A fabricated death certificate. A bogus police statement. No body ever found. Your father, Margaret said grimly, claimed your life insurance too. $500,000. Jasmine felt her stomach twist in revulsion. He profited from my death? And then some, Margaret replied, flipping through more documents. That tragedy? It was the foundation of his public image. The man who lost everything and rose from the ashes with a heart of gold? All of it built on the lie of your death. Jasmine stared at the documents. Not just paper, not just ink. These were the receipts of betrayal, and now she had them. The world thought Richard Blackwell was a hero. But Jasmine Mitchell knew the truth. And she wasn't just going to expose him. She was going to destroy him. There was more. Helena hadn't just been a victim. She'd been on the trail of a monster. 2 weeks before her death, she had hired a private investigator. She suspected that Richard was involved in something far darker than anyone could have imagined. An illegal adoption ring selling children to the highest bidder. But then, like a whisper in the dark, the investigator disappeared. Just like Helena. That's when Jasmine saw it. Richard's true, calculated brilliance. He hadn't merely disposed of an unwanted daughter and a wife who had become inconvenient. No, he had turned their double murder into social and financial capital. "There's something else," Margaret said, her voice low as she handed Jasmine a grainy photograph. In it was Helena, lying conscious in a hospital bed. "She didn't die in the accident," Margaret whispered. "She survived for 2 hours, fully conscious. Before she passed, she said something to the nurse. Something about protecting the girl from the monster." Jasmine felt tears sting her eyes. Her mother had died knowing her daughter was still in danger. But if Richard Blackwell thought his daughter was a corpse, buried and forgotten, he was about to learn a brutal truth. Some ghosts don't haunt from the shadows. They come back to finish what the living could not. Margaret placed a thick folder into her hands. "Everything you need is here. But Jasmine, this man is dangerous. If he killed your mother for the inheritance..." "He won't hurt me," Jasmine said, calm and certain, surprising even herself. "Because he doesn't know I exist." And that, she knew, would be her greatest advantage. While Richard Blackwell continued his double life, philanthropist by day, predator in disguise, believing that his sins had been laid to rest with the daughter he thought dead, Jasmine was planning a reunion that would destroy the world he'd built on her grave. She had already chosen the stage, the next Blackwell Foundation Gala, a lavish annual event held, ironically, for orphaned children. That would be the night Richard discovered that death has its own method of debt collection. And Jasmine, the daughter he discarded, had returned not just alive, but armed with truth. The night of the gala arrived with grandeur. The Blackwell Foundation's event was in full swing. Chandeliers sparkled, cameras flashed, and the city's elite mingled in tailored suits and sequined gowns. On stage, Richard delivered his rehearsed speech with convincing sorrow. "We all deserve second chances," he proclaimed. "The transformative power of a father's love is something these children, orphans, like the daughter I tragically lost, desperately need." Applause thundered. No one noticed the young waitress moving gracefully through the crowd, a tray of champagne in one hand, and 20 years of anger hidden behind her composed smile. Jasmine watched her father from the shadows, each word from his mouth a fresh insult to her mother's memory. Today, Richard Blackwell would meet his daughter, and not the innocent child he tried to erase, but the storm she had become. Ladies and gentlemen," Richard continued, basking in the applause. "As a man who lost his child, That's when Jasmine stepped forward and took the microphone from an unsuspecting assistant. "Excuse me, Mr. Blackwell. May I ask you a question?" The room froze. All eyes turned. Richard blinked, irritation flashing in his eyes. "Miss, shouldn't you be serving drinks?" "I was," Jasmine said coolly. "But as the daughter of orphans, your speech touched me deeply." She walked up the steps and onto the stage, ignoring the rising murmur of confused guests. "Especially when you said you lost a daughter. Can you tell us more about that?" Richard's mask slipped for a fraction of a second. He forced a smile. "Well, it was a personal tragedy. I'd rather not." "That's a shame," Jasmine interrupted, and she turned the microphone up. "Because I have some very interesting details about your lost daughter." He stared at her now, really saw her, and in that moment, the blood drained from his face. "She didn't die in an accident," Jasmine said, her voice steady. "You left her behind after killing her mother. You did it for the inheritance." Then she smiled, cold, sharp, "And she's standing right in front of you." The ballroom erupted in stunned gasps. "You can't be." "Jasmine Helena Mitchell," Richard stammered. "Or rather, Jasmine Helena Blackwell," she corrected. "Your daughter, the one you declared dead to collect $500,000 in life insurance." The room was chaos. Murmurs swelled into shouts. Richard lunged toward the microphone, but Jasmine stepped away, holding up a thick envelope. "Nay. Ladies and gentlemen, let's get to know the real Richard Blackwell, shall we?" she said. "Here are the fake death certificates he created for me and my mother. Here are the insurance payout receipts. And this," she held up a large photo, "is Helena Blackwell's autopsy report. She didn't die in a car crash. She was poisoned 2 hours later." Richard staggered backward. "That's absurd. Slander." "Is it?" Jasmine nodded toward the large projection screen behind them. "Then explain this." The screen lit up with a photo from Richard's private study, one Jasmine had taken weeks earlier. A framed photo of her as a child, smiling, with the inscription written in her child's hand. "To the most amazing dad in the world. I love you. Jasmine." The silence that followed was total. 20 years, Jasmine said, voice trembling with fury. 20 years I thought I was abandoned. I thought my parents were gone, while you used our deaths to build your fake legacy, to steal money meant for children like me. Margaret appeared at the side of the stage, camera in hand, recording every second. "But here's the best part," Jasmine added with a bitter laugh. "You hired me to serve champagne at this gala, at the foundation you built on our graves. That's poetic, don't you think?" "You have no proof," Richard rasped. "Oh, but I do," she said. "Press members, did you get the files I emailed 5 minutes ago, including the recordings of Richard Blackwell telling his lawyer he got rid of the wife and daughter problem?" Cameras flashed. Reporters scrambled. Richard looked around, watching his empire collapse in real time. "You planned this," he whispered. "Of course I did," Jasmine said, savoring every word. "You taught me that revenge is best served cold." She leaned in. And Dad, 20 years is a long time to cool." The audience stood. Some guests walked out, shouting that their donations would be withdrawn. Others stared, stunned, as the illusion of Richard's goodness dissolved. Jasmine descended from the stage. "Oh, and Richard," she called out, "you'll be happy to know the FBI is on their way. They say my evidence is more than enough. Insurance fraud, murder, money laundering." The sirens began to wail outside. And as the handcuffs clicked around his wrists, Richard Blackwell finally understood that the daughter he thought he had buried had not only survived, she had returned to bury him. But as he was led away, one question echoed in the air. After 20 years of lies, betrayal, and revenge carried out with surgical precision, could there ever be redemption for a family destroyed by greed? Or are some wounds simply too deep, even when justice is done? 6 months after Richard Blackwell's arrest, Jasmine sat in the corner office once occupied by the man who tried to erase her. The plaque on the door now read, "Helena Blackwell Foundation Executive Director Jasmine Mitchell." The FBI had frozen all of Richard's assets. Their investigation uncovered that only 12% of the foundation's donations had ever reached orphan children. The rest had funded a lavish lifestyle built on corpses and forged documents. "Ironic, isn't it?" said Margaret, now her official assistant, flipping through financial reports. "He used her death to raise millions. And now, you're using those same millions to finally help the kids." Jasmine smiled as she signed a check for the fifth new orphanage. Every dollar would now go where it was meant to. Real children, real futures. The transformation had been radical and public. The once anonymous waitress who had served champagne to billionaires was now featured on national magazine covers as the daughter who came back from the dead to bring justice. Time magazine had named her one of the 30 most influential people of the year. TV networks begged for exclusive rights to her story. Documentaries were already in production. Talk shows lit up her inbox. "You've become more famous than he ever was?" laughed Marcus, the former bartender who now served as the foundation's event coordinator. "Richard spent decades building a reputation, and you demolished it in 20 minutes. And what a demolition it had been. Updates about Richard Blackwell came in regularly from the federal prison system, each one more humiliating than the last. He had become what he feared most: irrelevant, exposed, and forgotten. Jasmine, meanwhile, continued the work he had pretended to do, only for real and in her mother's name, a name that would no longer be remembered for tragedy, but for truth, strength, and legacy. Because sometimes the past doesn't stay buried. Sometimes the dead don't stay gone. And sometimes the daughter you thought you buried grows into the reckoning you never saw coming. His former associates had wasted no time filing lawsuits, desperate to recover the $8.2 million they had invested in the fraudulent foundation. It wasn't just the money. It was the reputations, their legacies, now tainted by association with a man revealed to be a murderer and a con artist. One by one, they distanced themselves, publicly and brutally. 3 of Richard's ex-wives broke their silence, shattering previously ironclad confidentiality agreements. Their tell-all books hit the market like a tidal wave. Married to a Monster, Life with a Psychopath, and How I Escaped a Killer. Each painted Richard Blackwell not as a misunderstood man, but as a calculating sociopath. The elite golf club that had once honored him as its shining benefactor removed his honorary member plaque and renamed the annual tournament that once bore his name. The prestigious university library wing he had funded had his name scrubbed from its walls. Even the church he had attended for years asked that he not return after his release. The message was clear. Richard Blackwell was no longer welcome anywhere. But for Jasmine, the story wasn't about what he lost. It was about what she had gained. In the course of her investigation, she discovered that her mother, Helena, had a sister, Sarah, who had never stopped searching for her niece. For years, Sarah had chased dead ends and false leads, finally giving up after being told Jasmine had perished in the same accident as Helena. The day they finally met, Sarah stood in the doorway, tears in her eyes. "You have her eyes," she whispered, holding up an old photo of Helena. "Your mother would be so proud to see who you've become." In Sarah, Jasmine didn't just find a relative. She found a mother figure, a mentor, and the family she had never known. Together, the 2 women poured themselves into the work Helena had begun. They compiled every note, every scrap of paper, every voice memo left behind from Helena's fight against corrupt adoption agencies. What started as a private crusade evolved into a nationwide operation. With the FBI now backing the investigation Helena had died trying to finish, 47 arrests were made, and 12 illegal adoption agencies were shut down permanently. "Helena didn't die in vain," Sarah had said one evening as they sifted through handwritten journal entries and newspaper clippings. "She planted seeds, and you've made them bloom into an entire forest." While Jasmine built a legacy, Richard withered in obscurity. He was sentenced to 25 years for murder, fraud, and money laundering. His fortune was seized and redistributed, the proceeds going to real orphans and struggling families. His friends, once eager to be photographed beside him, disappeared. His legacy, once made of polished stone and magazine covers, crumbled into ash. Occasionally, he tried to reach out to Jasmine. Letters, written in shaky handwriting, arrived at the Foundation's headquarters. Margaret intercepted them all. One she remembered in particular. "I was young and stupid when this happened. If you really are my daughter, please forgive me. I can explain everything." Jasmine had read it once, tore it into 4 pieces, and dropped it into the shredder without hesitation. "Forgiveness," she said quietly, "is a luxury murderers don't get." But Jasmine's true vindication didn't come from revenge. It came from the ripple effect of her work. Each month, she received more than 800 letters from children and families who had been helped by the Helena Blackwell Foundation. "Jasmine, I got a scholarship to study medicine at Harvard," wrote Amanda, age 16. "Thank you for teaching me that our past does not have to define our future." Another letter from a 14-year-old boy read, "You inspired me to become a lawyer. I want to defend children like you defended your mother." One letter, handwritten in careful script by a single mother, simply said, "Thanks to the Foundation, our family is finally reunited after 8 years apart. My children are home." In an interview with Anderson Cooper on CNN, 6 months after Richard's arrest, Jasmine was asked if she still harbored any anger toward the man who had tried to erase her from history. She took a moment before answering. "Anger is a luxury I can't afford," she said. "Richard Blackwell taught me, unintentionally, the most valuable lesson of my life, that our origins don't define our destiny. He tried to erase me from history, but in doing so, he gave me a blank page to write my own story." As the program aired, the screen lit up with images of the Helena Blackwell Foundation in full operation. 5 modern orphanages, 200 children receiving education, 89 families reunited, and 156 young adults awarded college scholarships. All of it funded by the very fortune Richard Blackwell had stolen, never suspecting it would one day be turned against him. "The difference between us," Jasmine continued, "is that he used a tragedy to benefit himself. I used a tragedy to benefit others. He built an empire of lies. I built a legacy of truth." The final scene of the segment showed Jasmine standing at her mother's grave. The weather was calm. A soft wind rustled the leaves as she placed a bouquet of white roses against the new pink marble headstone. The old metal plaque had been replaced with something that finally told the truth. Helena Blackwell, mother, activist, heroine. She fought for those who had no voice. Her daughter has completed the mission. Jasmine knelt, touching the smooth surface of the stone. "We did it, Mom," she whispered. "Justice finally came, and it came through the daughter he tried to erase, but whom you raised to be indestructible." As she turned to leave, her phone buzzed with a new notification, an alert that the Foundation had just broken its weekly fundraising record. More money had been raised in a single week than Richard Blackwell had ever donated in his entire career as a self-proclaimed philanthropist. That night, in her new apartment overlooking the Chicago skyline, Jasmine sat alone for the first time in weeks. The city sparkled below her, alive and bustling, but inside the quiet sanctuary of her home, she reflected on the unbelievable arc of her life. From a nameless waitress carrying champagne to the tables of the elite, to the voice of thousands of children who once had none. Her phone rang. It was Sarah. "How was your day, dear?" she asked warmly. Jasmine smiled. "Transformative," she replied, watching the lights flicker across the skyline. 50 more children were adopted today through our program. How about you? I finished organizing Helena's journals. We're going to publish a book about her work." Even in death, Helena Blackwell was still saving lives. The greatest revenge hadn't been in the destruction of Richard Blackwell, though that part had been poetic. The greatest revenge had been in becoming everything he had pretended to be, and more. Jasmine had built the legacy he only faked. While he now sat in a concrete cell, counting the slow passage of days, watching grainy news reports of his daughter on national television, she woke up every morning wrapped in Egyptian silk sheets, walking the halls of a foundation named after the woman he murdered. He had tried to erase her, to vanish her from the world like a mistake he could profit from. But she hadn't just survived. She had returned, rebuilt, and risen. Today, Richard Blackwell wakes to the clang of steel bars, eats meals off metal trays, and sleeps on concrete in a 9x12 cell. Jasmine Mitchell wakes to emails from world leaders, photos from orphanages in need, and letters from children who now have a future because she refused to disappear. And that is a victory no prison, no lie, and no betrayal can ever undo. Kinsey, if this story of justice, family, and transformation moved you, subscribe to the channel for more incredible true stories that prove the human spirit is stronger than any darkness. Because real victory isn't just about surviving the storm. It's about becoming the lightning that turns survival into hope for those still trapped in the night.